Hey guys, this is Alistair Everett, also known as Fancy Action from Chingu, and these are my 5 main takeaways from our project this voyage. So, a little background here. This is my second voyage, and I just started learning JavaScript really back in October, so I'm still new, like a lot of Chingu members. Our team was made of 4 people here: Mr. Bighead, Alex Ever, Jetro. You'll probably see their names a lot if you're part of a previous voyage or a future one. I already know they have a team going in the next one. So what we did for this voyage is we made a game with a framework called Phaser.js. In our game here, I'm not going to demo the full thing, but give you an idea. It's a little kind of like a arcade game inspired by old Japanese computer game I enjoy called, I'm not going to tell you the names, it's kind of too long and ridiculous to remember, but our game's called Chingu Warrior. Simple to remember, simple to play. If you go to chinguwarrior.surge.sh, you could play it yourself and post your top score. So let's jump into this. So these are going to be 5 good, 5 bad things. These are just the main things I personally learned from this voyage. The first thing is, I went into this voyage after a rocky first voyage back in February, where some things worked, some things didn't. I had members that dropped out, and I had other members that I became really close with, which I think a lot of people have a similar hit and miss time with their first voyage, because I've never come across anybody in a voyage that was negative or mean-spirited, but you will come across a lot of people that, one of the hardest things with being a programmer is having an accurate sense of time and commitment. And a lot of people will join a voyage thinking, oh, I could do this on the side, along with my job, and realistically they discover they can't, and so then they drop out, and that often leaves somebody like myself without a member, and then you have to try your best to recruit members mid-voyage. So this time I took a different approach, and I just found people in chat at the end of the last voyage that I got along with that had enthusiasm for making a game, and seemed like they had a good work ethic. And so I approached about 2 to 3 people doing this, and I got what I call my dream team. The members I mentioned at the start, like they're very, they're everything you want in a team member. Good communication, good attitude, good work ethic, and also a very diverse skill set, which I'll get into later. But my main bit of advice is, if this is your first voyage, then yeah, it's going to be difficult to do this. But I'll say don't be discouraged your first voyage. Use your first voyage as kind of getting your feet wet. And if it goes great, then awesome. If it doesn't, then keep this in mind. And at the end of it, take note of who you would want to be with on the next voyage and preemptively form a group with them. And you're going to have a much better time. That's just how it is, even in life. If you start a job and some people are good, some people aren't, well, wouldn't you like to go into your next job with the people you like? It's like, well, when you're doing a side project, you have that freedom. My next bit of advice is to make something you want to use. So making a game is a no-brainer for me since I play games. I like games. I used to make games in the past with Unity, but I've never done that with JavaScript. And also, I haven't made a game in years now. So, I have as much knowledge as anybody else in this project, which is very little, going into it, making a game. But all of us had a lot of enthusiasm for doing that, and it was very difficult to do for multiple reasons I'll get into. But it was worth it, because every week when we made progress, when things were working with the ball physics or the menus or the UI or the score system, it was really rewarding, because we liked playing it. We liked using our own project. Well, if you're just copying, Trello or whatever, copying some site, it's like, yeah, that's cool as a learning exercise, but really, you're not going to be pushing yourself as hard as I think you would if you're making something you want to use. That's my personal opinion. But the other thing is, this is my favorite project I've worked on because I could return to it and I could play it, and it's just a cool feeling. Like, man, I made this. Like, and I like it because I made it because it's something I like. And I'm not saying you have to make a game, but I do think you should at least once, try to make something you want to use, whether that's a comic book collection keeper or your own game. Okay, so one of the things that made this project so difficult was that, well, one, none of us have experience making games, and that's a very different thing than making a website or an app. The other thing that made it very difficult is that the framework we chose to use, Phaser.js, was in a transition period going from version 2 to 3, and they made some massive overhauls where if you looked at tutorials, if you looked at GitHubs for games built on Phaser 2, a lot of it did not carry over. So it's not the sort of thing where you could reference something. I mean, some threads were still there, but sometimes like a whole functionality like gamepad support is completely different in 3. And also things are changing every week with Phaser. But I'll get into that in my next slide. This one is more about, because of what I just explained, it really required us to be creative with our learning process. We didn't have a lot of tutorials and YouTube videos to guide us, so we really had to console log all the built-in components, saying console log this all the time and getting an idea of how this framework worked. Another thing was looking at the GitHub for the code itself and understanding what's inside each component, or what is this connected to, why is this doing this. And in my current job, I do that sort of thing all the time. If you're going to come into somebody's project, you're going to have to learn on the fly by doing these same things. And that's why I think it was even though it's difficult, I felt those skills are very valuable and very they're lifelong skills that will carry over into each project. The other thing that was really nice about this project was getting involved with the Slack and Discord and forums built around either HTML5. This is one right here, HTML5 game devs. Phaser also has its own Slack and Discord where the key members of their development team will answer questions. And not every framework is going to have that sort of thing, but it's worth looking into if whatever you're using, if there's a community you could join to ask tough questions. And there's always going to be Stack Overflow, so you could always count on that. So as I was saying before, the Phaser.js, at least in the time we started, the framework was really split between people learning Phaser 3, which is very new, and using Phaser 2 Community Edition, which is kind of like community's version of the feature set they want. In the meantime, I guess they waited for 3 to update a little bit more to their liking. And Phaser was a bit of a battle to work with because not only is it very large and complicated, their code, but also literally every week it would change, and some of these changes were massive. Some of these changes were about how does data get transferred from between scenes, and scenes are, as you think they would be. They're like your levels, your UI menu, and so we would discover things like, well, if we update, it's going to break that, or if we want to update, we might get gamepad support that works better. And it was a real battle every week trying to figure out what's worth updating for and what's worth ignoring. And you really don't want to be dealing with that sort of thing when you're just building to learn. If this was a real career project where we decide we're going to work on this, do or die for 2 years, then yeah, maybe you accept those battles and you make the most of it, and maybe you reconsider moving to Unity or something if that makes sense. But for us, we just wanted to learn and build a game. And so my advice is to be careful when you're joining a project with a framework that is kind of in an experimental phase. I think if we did it again, I would probably have just gone with Phaser 2, because then we wouldn't be so lost, all the time. The last thing I want to leave on a positive note was, a lot of times, Chingu's trying to building around people in the same time zone, but actually this was a very positive experience of having members all around the world, because what it did for us was every day we would wake up and either people in Europe or people over here in the States would be working. And so maybe that worked out because some of us work late and some of us work early, so there was a lot of crossover there. But regardless, it was really nice to be able to go to bed and wake up to progress, as opposed to sometimes when you're all working together and you have a bad day where everything goes wrong and nobody's progressing, that could kind of kill momentum. While here, it's always like, well, if I just go to sleep, maybe things will be fixed by then. And sometimes that worked out. Sometimes it was me doing the fixing. Sometimes it was somebody else. The other thing that really made this project nice was it just kind of worked out that all of us had different interests and skill sets. So we had Alex really focused on the UI and menus and music and that sort of thing, the aesthetics of it, while Sparta would be working on the more technical stuff. If there was a real challenge, he was always up for it. So of course I would give him ball physics or whatever to work on, and he did his best with that. And so it's nice division of tasks, and with a game that could get really complicated. So I think it would be hard to work on a game if you didn't have that sort of diversity in your team skill set. And last but not least, you need to have a team that enjoys working together. We really bonded over how much we hated Phaser at times and how broken our game was at times. But, because we enjoyed working together, because we had a positive attitude, we made it through some, weeks where we thought we wouldn't be able to complete our project, And actually, we ended up, completing it with about a week to spare. Which is no small feat considering all I shared here with never making a game, using a framework that was kind of in a transition phase and not having a lot of resources to depend on. So I hope me sharing this kind of gives you an idea of what it takes to build a Chingu project, especially a game project, and things to keep in mind as you go into your next voyage or you plan on this current voyage. So, good luck. And if I'm in the chat, feel free to say hi.